The autumn evening was cooling fast, the kind of dusk where the warmth of the day disappears all at once, like someone flipped a switch. Street lights flickered on one by one along the row of shops on Belmont Avenue, and the last of the after-work crowd hurried toward the train station, coat collars turned up against the wind. Catherine Whitfield stood outside the glass doors of her downtown office, waiting for her car, checking her phone out of habit more than necessity. She was 53 years old. Silver threading through dark hair she still wore pulled back in the same severe, efficient style she'd favored since her 20s. She was the CEO of Whitfield Capital, an investment firm she'd built from nothing after her own difficult childhood, a fact she rarely mentioned and never used for sympathy. She wore a camel-colored coat, sharp and expensive, and an expression that had long ago settled into the practiced neutrality of someone used to being the most powerful person in every room she entered. Success had cost her things over the years, a marriage, mostly, and long stretches of time with her own now-grown daughter, but she rarely let herself dwell on the cost. Tonight, though, standing in the cooling air with no way urgent to be, she found herself doing exactly that. Catherine had grown up 2 towns over from where her office now stood, in a house where the heat was rationed by the month and dinner some nights was whatever could be stretched furthest. Her own mother had worked double shifts at a diner rather than ever consider giving Catherine up, though there had been lean years when the possibility must have crossed her mind more than once. Catherine rarely spoke about any of that at the office, where her employees knew her as a woman who'd apparently simply arrived, fully formed, in a tailored suit with a talent for reading balance sheets. But standing on that darkening street, some old, half-buried part of her recognized the particular stillness of a child who has learned to wait without complaint long before she consciously understood why the scene in front of her felt so familiar. That was when she noticed the little girl. She sat on the bench outside the shuttered flower shop across the street, hands folded neatly in her lap, a small pink backpack beside her. She looked to be about 7, with dark curly hair in 2 uneven braids, wearing a yellow raincoat that was a size too big, the kind bought to be grown into. She wasn't crying. That was the detail that struck Catherine first. The girl wasn't upset. Exactly. She was simply waiting, with the patient, disciplined stillness of a child who has been told very clearly to behave and is determined to do exactly that, no matter how long it takes. Catherine crossed the street. "Hello there," she said, crouching slightly, keeping her voice gentle in a way she rarely had cause to use. "It's getting cold out here. Are you waiting for someone?" The girl looked up, polite but wary. "My daddy," she said. "He said to sit right here and be good, and he'd be back soon." "How long have you been waiting, sweetheart?" The girl considered this seriously, the way children do when time hasn't fully solidified into something they can measure. Since it was still light out. "He said to wait and not talk to strangers, but you seem nice." She studied Catherine's face for a moment. "My daddy says you can tell if someone's kind by their eyes." Something in Catherine's chest tightened, an old ache she didn't examine too closely. "Your daddy sounds like a wise man. I'm Catherine. What's your name?" "Maddie. Madison Reyes, but everyone calls me Maddie." "Hi, Maddie. Do you know where your daddy went?" Maddie shook her head. "He said he had to talk to somebody about a job. He said it might take a while, and I should be brave and wait, and he'd come get me for sure." Her small hands twisted the strap of her backpack. "He kissed my head twice before he left." "He never kisses me twice unless something's wrong." Catherine felt that detail land somewhere it shouldn't have been able to reach. Twice, not once. A child noticing the difference. She glanced around the street, empty now except for the wind pushing dead leaves along the gutter, and made a decision. "Maddie, I don't think it's safe for you to keep waiting out here in the cold by yourself. Would it be all right if I helped you look for your dad? We could start at wherever you two were staying, if that's all right with you." Maddie hesitated, weighing the instruction to wait against the growing chill and the growing wrongness of how long a while had already stretched. "Okay," she said finally. "We've been staying at the shelter on 4th Street, the one with the blue awning. I know the way." The Woad shelter rearranged something in Catherine's understanding of the evening immediately, though she kept her expression steady for Maddie's sake. She texted her driver to meet them instead, then held out her hand. Maddie took it after only a moment's hesitation, her small fingers cold even through mismatched mittens. They walked together through the darkening streets, Maddie directing with quiet confidence, clearly a child who had learned to navigate more of the world than any 7-year-old should have to. "How long have you and your dad been staying at the shelter?" Catherine asked as they walked, matching her pace to Maddie's shorter stride. "Since summer. Before that we were at my aunt's, but her apartment got too small when her baby came, so Daddy said we needed our own plan." Maddie recited this with the careful, rehearsed neutrality of a child repeating an explanation she'd been given rather than one she'd fully understood. "He says it's temporary. He says a lot of things are temporary. Do you believe him?" Maddie considered this with the same searching seriousness she'd brought to studying Catherine's eyes earlier. "I used to. Easy. Lately it's harder. Not because he's lying, I don't think. I think it's just taking longer than even he thought it would." Catherine felt that observation land with unexpected weight, a 7-year-old parsing the difference between a lie and a hope that was simply overdue. "Tell me about your dad," Catherine said gently, partly to keep Maddie's mind occupied, partly because she found she genuinely wanted to know. "His name's Marco. He used to work at the warehouse, but they let a bunch of people go a few months back, and he hasn't found anything since. He tries really hard, though. He goes out every single day looking. He always tells me it's not my fault we don't have our own place anymore, even though I never asked if it was." Maddie's small chin lifted with something like pride. "He gives me his food sometimes and says he already ate. I know he's lying, but I eat it anyway because he gets sad if I don't." Catherine had to look away for a moment, blinking hard against the streetlights. "What about your mom?" she asked, once she trusted her voice again. "She left when I was really little. Daddy says some people just aren't built for staying, but he says he's built for it. He says he'll always come back for me." Maddie's voice wavered slightly on the last words, the first crack in her careful composure. "He always has. Every single time." They reached 4th Street, a modest building with a faded blue awning and a line already forming for the evening meal service. Catherine spoke with a woman at the front desk, a tired-looking volunteer with kind eyes, explaining who Maddie was and asking about Marco Reyes. While they waited for the volunteer to check her records, Catherine glanced around the entryway, a corkboard cluttered with job listings and bus schedules, a rack of donated coats, a hand-lettered sign reminding residents that check-in closed at 9. It was clean, carefully tended, clearly run by people trying their best with limited resources, and it struck Catherine, standing there in her camel coat, how thin the margin was between a life like this one and the life she'd built for herself 2 towns over, separated by little more than circumstance and the particular shape of luck. The volunteer's expression shifted, careful and sad. "Marco checked in early this morning, but he came back around 4 and had a long talk with our case manager. Then he left again about an hour ago. He seemed pretty distressed, if I'm honest. He didn't say where he was going." Catherine felt the shape of the evening tilt into something far more urgent than she'd first understood. "Do you know what the conversation with your case manager was about?" The volunteer hesitated, glancing at Maddie, then lowered her voice. "I probably shouldn't say much, but he's been asking about foster placement resources. For Maddie, he kept saying he couldn't keep doing this to her, that a stable family with a real home would be better for her than watching him fail over and over." The words landed heavily. Marco hadn't abandoned his daughter out of neglect or cruelty. He'd left her on that bench, safe in public view, precisely so someone would find her and get her somewhere warm, while he went to try to arrange, in his own devastated, well-meaning way, a life for her that didn't include watching him keep failing. Catherine knelt down in front of Maddie, who had gone very still, sensing without understanding the details that something important was being discussed. "Maddie, I think I know where your dad might be. I'm going to help find him. All right? But I need you to stay close to me." She turned back to the volunteer. "Do you have a number for the case manager? I need to know exactly where they discussed him going." 20 minutes and 3 phone calls later, Catherine had a name and an address, a family services office 6 blocks away that stayed open late 2 nights a week for emergency consultations. She and Maddie arrived just as the office was preparing to close, and Catherine spotted him immediately through the glass door, a man in his early 30s, exhausted in the particular way that comes from months of sustained fear rather than a single bad day, sitting across from a caseworker with his head in his hands. Maddie, wait right here with my driver for just one moment, Catherine said gently, and stepped inside alone first. Marco looked up as she entered, confusion crossing his face at the sight of a stranger in an expensive coat walking into a family services office at 8 o'clock at night. Can I help you? Mr. Reyes, my name is Catherine Whitfield. I found your daughter waiting for you outside the flower shop on Belmorn, right where you left her. She's safe. She's just outside. Catherine watched relief and shame war across his face in equal measure. I understand you were here discussing foster placement. Marco's composure cracked entirely then, tears coming fast and unguarded. I can't keep doing this to her. She deserves food that isn't leftover from a shelter line, a bed that isn't a cot, a dad who isn't circling job boards at 2 in the morning with nothing to show for it. I thought if I could just find her a real family, a stable one, she'd have a chance I can't give her. Does Maddie know that's what you were considering? No. God, no. I couldn't tell her. I just told her to wait, that I'd come back because I couldn't make myself say goodbye to her properly. I don't even know if I could have gone through with it once it came time to sign anything. He wiped roughly at his face. I just wanted her to have a chance. What made tonight the night you finally walked in here? Catherine asked, not unkindly, though she needed to understand the shape of what had brought him to this particular edge. Marco let out a long, unsteady breath. The shelter's transitional program has a hard cutoff, 90 days. Then you're back on the general wait list unless you've got steady income or a documented plan. We hit day 81 this week. I've had 4 interviews in 2 months and nothing, and every night I watch her fall asleep on that cot like it's completely normal, like she doesn't remember any different. And I think this is what I'm doing to her. This is the life I'm giving her by refusing to admit I can't fix it myself. Catherine sat down across from him, setting aside, for the moment, every instinct she had toward efficiency and briskness. Mr. Reyes, I run an investment firm downtown. I also sit on the board of a foundation that funds transitional housing and job placement for parents exactly in your position. I don't say that to make you feel like a charity case. I say it because it happens to be true, and because your daughter is sitting outside right now telling anyone who'll listen that her father always comes back for her. I don't think either of you needs that story to end tonight. Marco stared at her, disbelieving. Why would you do that? You don't know us. I know a little girl who ate her father's food because he lied about already eating, and still trusts him completely. Catherine's voice caught slightly, and she let it. I know what it costs a parent to reach the point where giving up your child feels like the most loving thing left to do. I also know that point is rarely as final or as necessary as it feels in the moment you're standing in it. Let me help. Not instead of you being her father. Because of it. It took another hour of paperwork, phone calls, and a case manager visibly startled by the sudden, decisive intervention of a woman she recognized from the business pages. By the time it was finished, Marco had a caseworker-assisted lead on a maintenance position at one of Whitfield Capital's own commercial properties, a 2-week stay arranged at a family transitional housing unit instead of the shelter, and Catherine's direct number, with explicit instructions to call for anything at all. When Marco finally stepped outside to Maddie, she ran to him without hesitation, and he lifted her, holding her the way people hold something they genuinely, secretly feared they might not get to hold again. I'm sorry, baby, he murmured into her hair. I'm so sorry that took so long. You came back, Maddie said simply, muffled against his shoulder. You always come back. Marco caught Catherine's eye over his daughter's head, and no further words were necessary between them. Catherine watched them for a long moment before turning to leave, and found herself, for the first time in longer than she could easily account for, unwilling to simply walk away and consider the matter closed. She thought about her own daughter, Grown now and living 3 states away, a relationship maintained mostly through scheduled calls and holiday visits, a casualty of the same relentless building of an empire that had, tonight, put her in exactly the right place to help a stranger's child. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. "Diane, I want a meeting with our foundation's board first thing tomorrow. I want to expand the transitional employment program, direct hiring pathways into our own properties, not just referrals elsewhere, and put together a list of every family currently in that shelter on 4th Street. I want to know what they actually need, not what we assume they need. This late? Is everything all right?" "Better than it's been in longer than I can say," Catherine said. "I'll explain in the morning. Just get it arranged." She hung up and stood a moment longer on the sidewalk, watching Marco carry his daughter toward the car, Maddie's arms looped tight around his neck, already half asleep against his shoulder despite everything the evening had held. The city around her, usually just a backdrop to numbers and quarterly projections, looked different tonight. Quieter, more human, full of people she'd spent decades walking past without truly seeing. She thought about the woman she'd been that same afternoon, checking her phone out of habit, waiting for a car, nearly too consumed by the day's closing figures to notice a little girl sitting patiently in the cold, keeping a promise to herself that her father would keep his. That woman already felt, tonight, like someone from a different life entirely. In the weeks that followed, Catherine kept closer track of the Reyes family than she'd initially planned to, checking in more out of genuine attachment than any sense of obligation. Marco started the maintenance position within 10 days, and within a month had been quietly recommended for a supervisory training track after a building manager noted, unprompted, how thoroughly he handled every job assigned to him. The transitional housing unit came with an actual bedroom door that Maddie could close, a detail she mentioned to Catherine on the phone with the kind of wonder usually reserved for far larger gifts. Catherine visited them herself, twice, in those first 2 months, once to drop off a bag of books she thought Maddie might like, and once, at Marco's shy invitation, for a dinner he'd insisted on cooking himself despite Catherine's protests that it wasn't necessary. Sitting at their small kitchen table, watching Maddie chatter about a school project with none of the careful, rationed hope she'd carried on that bench, Catherine found herself thinking, more than once, about her own daughter, and reaching for her phone afterward to actually place the call instead of simply composing the message she usually settled for. Marco told her, that dinner, that Maddie had started sleeping through the night again, something she hadn't done consistently since they'd left the shelter's cots for the transitional unit's quieter rooms. He said it in the offhand way people mention things that have quietly stopped haunting them, and Catherine understood, without needing it explained further, exactly what that small, unremarkable fact had cost him to earn back. The Foundation's expanded program launched 3 months after that evening on Belmont Avenue, built almost entirely around the gaps Catherine had seen firsthand walking Maddie home in the cold, direct hiring pipelines instead of referral lists that led nowhere, case managers with the authority to move quickly instead of waiting on committee approvals, transitional housing units with real doors instead of open cots. She named the program without much ceremony, mostly out of a private, sentimental impulse she didn't examine too closely. The Belmont Initiative, after a bench outside a flower shop where she'd once stopped for a girl in a yellow raincoat who was simply waiting, patiently, to be found.